Where to go?
And live on Facebook.
Are we live? Not yet.
Any second, people. Put your Facebook faces on.
Cookie.
Άρα δεν σε ακούμε.
Περιμένω, I'm waiting for the Facebook Live to start.
Meanwhile, is your name Christina down there, beginning with an X?
Yes, yes,
Oh.
yes.
Hi, Christina with an X.
Hello, Chris, with a C.
CH.
CH, sorry.
Ah. In Sweden, they use K, Christopher.
Okay.
I live in Sweden, they spell it differently over here, but I got the Greek spelling.
Okay.
All righty.
Now we are set. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Shiatsu friends. It's a celebration day for us here in Shiatsu World. We have the honor to host Chris McAlister for the presentation of his new book, Poetry of Touch. Few words about us before we give the floor to Chris. Very few words. We are Shiatsu World, Mara Papathanassiou and Panayota Polifroni Giannino. We have decided a few years ago to connect each other through this synergy, Shiatsu World, so we can promote and support the process of a Shiatsu practitioner to a professional level through the awareness of the professional identity of it. Supervision, seminars, workshops, podcasts, book clubs are some of our tools to support professional Shiatsu practitioners to their path, so they can cope with integrity, consistency, and adequacy to their work as professionals. This presentation today gives us the pleasure to be a part of all the above. Thank you all for being here. So I give the floor for a few minutes to Panayota.
Hello, everyone, and hello, Chris. Thank you very much for the honor to be our host tonight for your new book, The Poetry of Touch. A short bio for Chris. Chris has over 30 years of experience in Shiatsu, acupuncture, and herbal medicine. Chris has been a practitioner of Taiji, Qigong, and meditation since the mid-80s. I was a kid then and I had no idea of all these things. So thank you for making our path. Chris was head teacher in the Shiatsu department of Axelsson's School of Bodywork in Stockholm for 10 years. He has taught Shiatsu and acupuncture at his own academy and in schools around the world. And Chris is chief editor at Shiatsu Resources Worldwide, founder, director, and instructor of Mind Bodify, acupuncture and Shiatsu therapies at Alternative Academy, and Qigong meditation and relaxation instructor at Svenska Energiskolan in Sweden. And at least for the Greeks, I think that Chris is the most familiar for us because he's the president of the European Shiatsu Federation, and we have met you, Chris, many times in Athens for this purpose. But we also had the pleasure and honor to have you in Athens last September, and you presented your excellent book, Touching the Invisible, in which you are co-writer. And then after this meeting, Mara and I were so much inspired that we decided to have a book club. And we have done already 4 meetings with the group, and Christina is a member of the book club, Eleni, Ellie. And so we're very, very pleased to have you here and take us to your new journey with the poetry of touch. So I will spotlight you now, Chris, so everyone can see you.
There we go. Thank you very much for that introduction, Panayotta.
And one more thing, your comments and your questions, please write them on the chat, and Chris now and then will ask for them, so I will read them.
Yes, that's wonderful. I'm very much a fan of people asking questions whenever they like to. But I think in this particular context of a Zoom session like this, it might be a bit too much movement if people are coming in and out and asking questions spontaneously. So we'll stop every now and then and see if there's any questions on the chat, or if anybody's communicated with Panayotta or Mara. And if there's any questions, I'll happily ask them, because I'm usually inspired by questions. And that's how I learn, is by asking people endless amounts of questions. And they get very irritated with me, of course. But that's the only way to learn, I find. Observing is good, but if you don't interact with questions, it becomes a little bit too passive. So I'm one of these people who really, really encourages questions. And there's no such thing as a stupid question, because even if the question seems simple to you, it might not be simple to somebody else. It might be exactly the question somebody else needs to hear, but they can't quite formulate for themselves. So bring on your questions. And if you just have observations or things you're thinking about, it doesn't have to be a question. It can be anything you would like to bring into the meeting. That's absolutely fine. Thank you, Mara. Thank you, Panayotta. And it's an absolute pleasure to be integrating and interacting with you people this evening. Thank you very much for inviting me. Our subject tonight is the poetry of touch, and that is an unusual title for a book about Shiatsu. Well, it's not just about Shiatsu, obviously. It's about Shiatsu in a much wider sense. Because during my studies, during my journey into and through Shiatsu, it's been a much wider journey than just Shiatsu. Shiatsu became a crystalline focus of my efforts and my learning and my education. But before that was a lot of other things. So, for example, I learned about the I Ching, the Book of Changes, long before I knew anything about Shiatsu. I began to study Taiji at roughly the same time as I was introduced to any kind of pressure Oriental bodywork. So these disciplines go hand in hand for me. And the more I learned about them and the more different teachers I had in these different arts, the more I understood that they are simply manifestations of the same kind of seeking, the same kind of knowledge, the same type of interaction between man and woman and the world around us and the worlds within us. So around about 20 odd years ago, when I came to Sweden, I started to teach Shiatsu fairly immediately. I'd been teaching Shiatsu in Japan, funnily enough, but that was just to foreigners on a very basic level, people like myself who happened to be in Japan who were interested. But getting back to Sweden, I started to teach professionally, and that's when I really began to learn, of course. Most of you who are becoming teachers or have been teachers for a while will recognize that. The minute you start to teach something is when you really start to learn, because then the pressure is on. You have to present something, people have to understand it, they have to be able to use it, and the moment of transmission occurs, and then you have to be prepared. You have to really know what you're doing. And of course, you're learning as you're doing. As I began to teach and as I began to treat patients here in Sweden, the same questions came up again and again and again. And even though you explain things, It's never enough. So something like the triple heater and pericardium, for example, people never understand what they are, and it takes a long, long time to penetrate those subjects to any satisfactory level. So I started to write. I started to write text, and I was reminded that writing was something that came quite naturally to me, always, even when I was a kid and when I was a teenager. And writing letters is something I've been annoying people with for all my adult life. So writing is quite natural for me, and I found it very easy to transfer various ideas that I had onto paper and bring them into a form that is easily digestible. And sometimes, I don't know if anybody here is a writer or anybody watching on Facebook is a writer, but you'll notice that when you look at something you wrote 6 months ago or a year ago or 3-5 years ago, you sometimes wonder, how on earth did I get that formulation? How did I manage to describe that so clearly? It's a wonder. It's amazing. When you're in the writing moment, things happen and they go through you. It's the same with music. It's the same with poetry. It's the same with all of these creative arts. And of course, it's the same with Shiatsu. When you're in the Shiatsu space, you're in the Shiatsu space. And the more you are inside it, the closer you are to the process itself, the alchemy and the transformation. So my book is called The Poetry of Touch, but it's also called Alchemy, Transformation, and Oriental Medicine. So not just Shiatsu. The first book, Touching the Invisible, that was about Shiatsu and Oriental medicine, yes, but it was very much about the path of Shiatsu. This book is broader, much broader. It involves the study of martial arts. It involves the study of Qigong. It involves the study of herbal medicine, acupuncture. Shiatsu is in the middle of all of that, because Shiatsu is this beautiful combination of all of those arts in a modern sense, in a modern setting, and in a modern world. I think that Shiatsu is this beautiful vehicle. I call it a young branch on an ancient tree. And you can see from that image that the way I see things is that there is this tradition, this living tradition that we're part of, but we're a very modern part of it. And we're not ashamed to be modern. We're actually quite proud of that. The fact that Shiatsu is something quite new. It's only 100 or so years old. It's not very old at all, but it's part of this old tradition. But it's constantly being renewed. It's being renewed by people like Masanage. It's being renewed by people like Kawada Sensei in Brussels. It's being renewed by people like us as we speak. And people who write books take a special responsibility for that. Mike Mandel is one of the people who's writing at the moment. And there are several other people like Bill Palmer also writing and taking responsibility for framing what Shiatsu is and what it can be and what it could be moving forwards. So a young branch on an ancient tree. That's the way I see it. The roots are deep. They go so deep that we can't even see the roots. We don't know the roots of Chinese medicine, but that is one of my passions. Over the last 15 to 20 years, it's become apparent to me, even if it wasn't as apparent before, it's become apparent in these last 15 years or so that Chinese medicine, Oriental medicine, and Shiatsu within that rest upon an ancient platform, an ancient root system, which we in fact call the shamanic way. And there have been modern versions, like, for example, a lot of you study Seiki, and for me, that's like a modernization of shamanism, very, very close to the old roots of shamanism. And I think Kishi Sensei would almost certainly agree with that, although I didn't know him very well. I met him a couple of times. The roots of Chinese medicine definitely go back into shamanism. This has been shown time and time again. And one of my teachers really made that clear to me. His name is Ted Kapchuk. Ted Kapchuk was also a writer, right? He wrote a very famous book called The Web That Has No Weaver. It's a book that I don't like at all. Ted didn't like it at all. He mentioned it to us once, and he said, piece of crap. That was therapy for Ted. That book was his way of digesting the experience he had close to mainland China, trying to work with this thing called TCM, this modern 70s system, which in fact is very, very modern indeed. It's not it's not traditional at all. It's based on traditional medicine, but it's very, very modern. And it's a system that leaves out a lot of the salient features of Oriental medicine, namely shamanism and the spirituality, which we find so appealing within Oriental medicine. So Ted Kapchuk showed me very clearly through quotes and through references in ancient Chinese literature how old Chinese medicine becomes shamanism the further back you penetrate in time. For example, one of the key figures in Chinese medicine from the 600s and 700s in China is called Sun Simiao. Sun Simiao. And I've quoted him in my book several times. He's one of my heroes, one of my mentors, even though I never met him, of course, but I do feel in touch with him. Sun Simiao went all around China collecting old formulas, herbal formulas. And while he was doing that, he found all kinds of other stuff as well. One of the things he found was the song of the ghost points. Now, you've all heard of the ghost points, I'm sure. Some of you maybe even used them. And it was something that intrigued me for a long, long time. But all I could find was just these tiny references in the textbooks. This point is a ghost point. This point is a ghost point. But what does it mean? How do we use them? What are they? All these questions were flowing around me, but I didn't find any answers to that. I had to answer those questions for myself by testing the ghost points in practice. That's a long story, and I talk about it in the book in 2 different chapters. And those chapters are quite close to the beginning of the book. So Sun Simiao found this ancient poem called the Song of the Ghost Points. And it's one of these old teaching devices in China where they write a poem. And the poem is rhyming. Each line rhymes with the line before it. And the names of the points are in the lines. And the indications of the points are there. But more importantly, the location of the point is there. So we have this poem. It's about 1 page long, that's all. And it describes to us which points are the ghost points, where they are on the body, and where it comes from. And where does it come from? Well, it comes from Bian Shui. And Bian Shui is called the bird doctor. Doesn't that sound shamanic? It does, doesn't it? And there exists an old woodblock printing of Bian Shui, the bird doctor, doing acupuncture on a patient, and he's pictured as a bird. The image is of a bird doing acupuncture on a human being. So I find myself very supported by these ancient snippets and fragments that our medicine is incredibly old. It goes way back into the mists of time, before recorded history, before writing, before these kind of things began to be written down, and before things were systematized. Now, there's nothing wrong with systems. Don't get me wrong. I like systems. I love to study models. I love to study systems. In fact, I've more or less created one myself, the 4 C's, which I'll be teaching in May in Athens. But the system always has a problem, doesn't it? The system includes. That means it excludes, right? In exactly the same moment you include stuff, you exclude other stuff. So there's never going to be a system, there never has been a system that's perfect, because a system includes and excludes. It never will be complete. Just like the map is not the territory. But we have this incredible link with the past, with the shamanic practices. And this links us then to the world of medicine, because all medicine comes from shamanic practice. In the end, that's where it comes from, always. Doesn't matter if it's from Japan or Greece, if it's from Hungary or it's from Yugoslavia somewhere or Uruguay. It's all shamanic in the bottom. And this is one of the things I wanted to bring to the book. And if later on we'll look at the cover of the book and we'll see that the design of the book shows this. It shows a code of shamanism. Oh, look, we have it behind Mara there. We can see it. On that cover, you can see several things which give you the clue about the shamanic origins of Chinese and Oriental medicine. One of them is the crane. That's a crane flying at dusk in southern Sweden. A student of mine, Annika Nygren, took that picture and she agreed to let me have it and she was delighted to have it on the cover of this book. And it symbolizes, in the Orient, the crane symbolizes elegance, flight, but also longevity, which means long life. And it's one of these old Taoist symbols. It's probably been used in all sorts of different cultures to symbolize that kind of thing. But in older terms, it's also a very important symbol in shamanism. The symbol, the Chinese character, which you might be able to see underneath, I'm not sure if Mara can show us that or if that's stuck on her screen and we can't see it. There's a symbol there, a Chinese character. I'll show it to you later on in detail. We maybe even do some practice about that. That Chinese character means Ling. And you'll know that Chinese character because you all know about Reiki. Ling is the Chinese translation of it, Chinese phonetic version, but Rei is the Japanese version. And when we say Rei-ki, we mean universal energy, universal soul energy, in fact. The Ling, or Rei, is the soul that we're all part of. It's not the Shen. The Shen is individual. You all have a Shen. I have a Shen. That's not the same thing. This is the Ling. It's bigger and it's timeless. It goes through time completely. So when you start to use the Ling points, which hopefully we'll do today, maybe later on in a little practice session, you will begin to connect with non-time, non-linear time, circular time, spiral time, but also non-time. And also place, non-place. You'll be able to be in different places. Ling has this quality of not being local and not being linear in terms of time. So L-I-N-G, Ling. Beautiful concept. That is on the cover of the book as well, because the Ling takes us back beyond Chinese medicine into a time when things were timeless and shamans were able to connect through time and space on all levels. The color of the book, you'll see that it's almost the color of my shirt here. That doesn't quite show on this particular screen, but the blue-green color in the middle of the cover, the book cover there, is the name of one of the Ling points. There are 5 acupoints on the body with Ling in their name. And one of them is called Qing Ling. It doesn't sound like it's for real, does it? It sounds like it's made up. Qing Ling. It's actually the name of a Chinese point, and it's heart 2 on the arm here. Qing Ling means the blue-green Ling. And blue-green turns out to be one of the colors for alchemy. So we come back to this term alchemy. What do we mean by alchemy? We mean transformation beyond time and space. We mean transforming our base body, our physical presence, our physical body with all of its wiring, its tubes, its fluids, its movements, its rhythms. We connect that to the eternal through the intelligence embodied in our spirit, through the eternal soul. So alchemy is the process of refining that development, refining the workings of the physical and connecting them with the universal soul, the eternal, the ever. So all of that is on the cover of the book. It's in a code, of course, but now I've just decoded it for you so you can look at that and think, oh yeah, that was that, and that was that, and that was that. And that was what Chris was talking about. But then we come back to this thing called poetry. Now, before I go into that theme, was there anything that people wanted clarification with Panayotta, or questions or anything that came up?
There is, on chat, there is a comment from Margaret. I really like this book title.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I don't know from Facebook if there are any comments, Mara.
Not yet.
Very good. What I might do now is switch to the book itself and read you a short passage from the book. And it's the passage which I've called the Poetry of Touch. And it's kind of an explanation of why this idea of poetry is so important to our sense of reality and the way that we present reality in Oriental medicine. Can I share my screen? Apparently I can. That's good. Let's see if this works. There it is, folks, the Poetry of Touch. Yes, very good. This is a kind of preface in the book. So it comes very early on. I'm just going to blink this away slightly so I can see the text nicely there. Poetry of Touch. And I'll take you up the text slowly so you can follow the writing if you want, or you can just listen, close your eyes and get into the feel of the words. We begin with a quotation. The quotation is by Niels Bohr, who you probably know is a Nobel Prize physicist, one of the fathers of quantum mechanics in many ways. When it comes to atoms, language can be used only as in poetry. A path with a heart. Several years ago, I gave a shiatsu treatment to a friend and colleague in Jerusalem. A man of intelligence and experience, he is the founder of a well-known and respected shiatsu school based on the same lineage as my own. Funnily enough, perhaps, I was not in the least bit nervous about treating him, most likely because I felt a bond of kinship with him. It felt very clear that we were on a similar wavelength when it came not only to Shiatsu, but many other issues in life. After the treatment, when I was finished but still sitting holding space on the mat beside him, he said a remarkable thing. You do Shiatsu like a poet. This is still the greatest compliment anyone has ever given me, and the most interesting thing anyone has ever said about my way of treating. Why does it feel so important for me to receive that kind of feedback on my Shiatsu method? The reason goes back to a series of books I read as a 20-year-old, in which Carlos Castañeda describes his apprenticeship with Don Juan Mate, a sorcerer from an ancient tradition in Mexico. The first 2 volumes of the series are filled with chaotic descriptions of intense hallucinatory experiences, highly entertaining, but virtually unintelligible. Book 3 shows the young adept finally realizing that he is an apprentice and casting a retrospective look that reveals method behind his master's apparent madness. Volume 4 is a sober account of the life of a serious adept, and from there on, we are led ever deeper into that remarkable system. It is many years now since these books were a part of my daily life, but still their flavor and intensity remain with me and colors my practice of Shiatsu, acupuncture, Taiji, and Qigong. The full revelation of the system behind the teachings in book 7 leaves a lasting imprint and a desire to, as Don Juan so eloquently exhorts, find a path with a heart and follow it. Bridging the gap. One of the strongest memories and most lasting impressions from the series is of a conversation where Don Juan reveals his love of poetry. Although somewhat incongruous at first, the reader is drawn in as the master explains the reasons for this love and appreciation. The poets, he says, are the only ones who can bridge the gap between the multi-layered, continually fluctuating fabric of reality as it is and the more mundane 3-4-dimensional version most of us experience through our 5 senses on a daily basis. The gap between what the seer perceives and that which regular individuals experience is of such a magnitude that normal prose or syntax proves to be a very blunt tool indeed. The Tao that can be expressed in words is not the true Tao, Lao Tzu, the Tao Te Ching. Language, formed by habit and colored by culture, is a product of everyday perception. Thus, it cannot, by its own logic, describe something that lies beyond its range. Therefore, poetry. Mystics throughout the ages have attempted to convey the essence of their insights in the form of stories, tales, sagas, and fables. One other vital form of communication has been poetry. Deviating from the regular syntax and grammar of regular prose, the poet also uses imagery to evoke the realms of reality beyond that which we perceive with the 5 senses in our normal waking state. Witness the speed with which Aldous Huxley presents fantastically complex ideas with just 4 lines of poetry in his Meditation on the Moon. Numinous feelings are the original God stuff, from which the theory-making mind extracts the individualized gods of the pantheons, the various attributes of the One. The method by which he takes us through the thought process is masterful and is accomplished with 4 short lines. No lengthy expounding, no list of references, no need to explain terminology, just straight to the bottom line. We are pulled into his vision and giving a chance to share his insight in less than half a minute. Seemingly effortless and efficient, it wastes no words and no time. It creates a vision, a sensation, an atmosphere, and we are moved, enlarged, expanded in a way that an academic exposition, however detailed, could never hope to achieve. Ralph Waldo Emerson explained it thus: poetry means saying the most important things in the simplest way. The impossible becomes possible. The power of the traditional Oriental system of medicine lies in that it can trace pathways through various energy states and identify connections manifesting at different levels. Therefore, it becomes possible, for example, to diagnose via emotions and to predict mental states through physical palpation. The impossible becomes possible as we learn to navigate with a compass that guides through both time and space. Naturally, such a sensitive instrument takes time to get the feel of. The wisdom of the Oriental method becomes apparent as we look back on our first classes and elementary exercises. We are grounded in the body, rooted in our physical being, and then expanded inwardly and outwardly. We are given more and more complex sub-models to work with, even as we work again and again through the basic moves and practices until they permeate our bodies and transform our perception and posture, our very breath. The method transforms us to the depths of our core and all the way out to the limits of our periphery. We become the compass. We transform ourselves into sensitive instruments of feel and perception. We are able to unlock doors long closed and assumed sealed off forever. We learn to expect the unexpected at every turn. My own personal motto has become, expect nothing, expect everything. Contradictory though that may seem at first glance, it is simply the product of experience. To expect nothing is a way to navigate difficult times. Expecting nothing, we are never disappointed, whatever the outcome. But gradually we realize that by expecting nothing, we may inadvertently negate a huge portion of life's wonders and mysteries. To then expect both nothing whatsoever, but also anything at all, becomes a way to welcome the full range of whatever life may be able to offer in any given moment. When we touch and treat the body, we always have in our awareness that the way of the body leads all the way to the spirit and all the way back again, always back again. The idea of substance becomes a very flexible one, where a mind state, merely by stagnating and impinging on the rest of the organism, can create physically palpable masses. In describing what we do in Shiatsu and acupuncture, we might use the term Oriental energy work, since in our tradition, the body is perceived to be energy in different stages of density. Material is seen as a slower form of energy movement. Fluids are somewhat faster. Ideas and mental states as fairly rapid, and spiritual energy is the fastest moving of all. To be true and open to the many levels of reality available to us in the richness of the moment, we immerse ourselves in the poetry of touch and treat like poets. So folks, that's the preface to the book, and hopefully it explains something about why the book has its title. The title came about 3 or 4 years ago, suddenly, and I was like, ooh, yes, I think that might be it. That might be the title. Any comments or questions?
Thank you, Chris, for reading us this part from your book. It is very beautiful and very poetic. And I'd like to ask you, how long how long did you take to write this book? I mean, it's a life project, obviously, but how many years have you been writing it?
The very first text in this book, and it's in one of the later sections of the book, in fact, the very first section was written somewhere around 2005. Somewhere around 2005-06. And the reason I wrote it was because I was teaching a class and I wanted to introduce a theme, but I thought if I write about it, then I don't have to present everything at once. The students can go away and read it later. In fact, they can read it before the class because they would receive the material beforehand, and then they will be already on my wavelength and understanding what it was I was trying to transmit to them. So that's about, I guess, what is that, 17 years something like that. And the process has been exactly that, me writing small pieces, 2, 3 pages, 4, 5 at most, and all of them were for the purpose of enlightening students or patients or both. And the reason is that when you're doing a treatment and somebody asks you, what's that? And you say, oh, well, that's the wood element and that's da, 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 da. And you find yourself talking, and then perhaps the patient, being in the state of being treated, won't remember much about it. So then you've wasted that explanation on somebody who couldn't really take it in because they're in the state of half trance and half hypnosis, right, that Shiatsu produces. So then I thought, why don't I write these things down, and then I can put them on a website or something like that, and people can read them later on. So that's how the whole thing started. And then halfway through the writing of Touching the Invisible, when it was near completion, in fact, I realized that I had a whole bunch of texts that didn't fit into that book at all. They were too long, they weren't quite the right topics, and it was too much of my stuff, and Jeremy and Jan had to be equally balanced in the book, of course. So I realized I had a whole bunch of material that was almost a whole book by itself. And around that time, a friend of mine was made unemployed. Very intelligent guy, a hugely artistic person, but he was suddenly unemployed and looking for things to do, looking for projects, you know, right, restless. So I said, look, he mentioned he was helping his brother write an ebook. I said, I got a bunch of stuff. Could you help me write my ebook? He said, yeah, sure. Send me the stuff. So I sent him 5 or 6 chapters of the book, which became the book, this book. But they weren't a book then. They were nothing. They were just separate pieces. So he sent me an email back a couple of days later. He said to me, yeah, Chris, great material. I'm sure this will make a great book. Thanks. It didn't help me at all. Well, a little bit. It did help me a little bit, because it's always nice to receive that kind of feedback rather than that's a load of trash, throw it in the bin. So it was positive feedback. It didn't help me at all. 2 nights later, I think it was, maybe 3, but very, very close around that time, I went out with a friend of mine to watch a football match, Champions League football. Barcelona won the game. They won their group. Wonderful, excellent. Had a few beers, came home, went to sleep, woke up in the middle of the night. Went to the toilet, came back, awake, and I was thinking about the match and the game and the evening, and it was all wonderful. Finished. Space. And then something happened, something remarkable happened. And I've written about it in the book, so you can read about it. It's in one of the chapters. And the chapter is all about the lung and large intestine meridians, in fact. But as you'll see, this chapter is also about the liver and gallbladder meridians, because if you think about the meridian clock, what happens? Around 11 o'clock, we get gallbladder, right? 1 o'clock, we get liver. What happens then? At 3 o'clock, we get this brutal shift from wood to metal. Well, of course, for most of it, it doesn't have to be that brutal, but it can be quite brutal. And a lot of our clients experience themselves awake around those times at night. Well, why is that? Because wood and metal are opposites. In a very special way, they're opposites. If you put the 5 elements like this, earth in the middle, fire at the top, water at the bottom, you've got metal over here and wood over here, right? They can work together or they can oppose each other. It happens. So I'm awake. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. And as if I was watching a film, these credits started to come up in front of my eyes. I had my eyes closed, of course, but these credits came up, and the titles of the sections of this book were presented to me by who knows what or where, my subconscious, maybe my oversoul, maybe my, who knows, maybe the Ling was talking to me, maybe Sun Miao was talking to me. I have no idea. But somewhere after the gallbladder and liver time, the lung reading woke me up and said, we've got something to show you. I think you're going to like it. I loved it. So it showed me all the sections. And I realized halfway through these sections, this is my book. This is the section. Wow. So next day, I sat down. Well, immediately I went out and I wrote this down, of course, so I wouldn't forget it. Of course, you did the same thing, wouldn't you? Next day, I took the list and I put it on a piece of paper, and then I had another piece of paper with all the articles, and I put each article into a section, and they all fit. There was 2 that didn't, and they're not in the book. But one of them is the big article on Masanaga that's going around through Ryoho Shiatsu right now. That's one. And the other is another thing for some other time. So I had the sections of the book already there, presented from within or from somewhere. Still don't know where that came from. In terms of meridian clock, of course, it came through the liver and gallbladder meridians work of creation, but it also came through the lung and large intestines work of putting things into frames, categories, boxes, easily dividing things up into differentiation. So the combination of the free and easy wanderer of the wood and the wise adjudicator of the metal together created this book structure for me. So all they had to do then was fill in the gaps, because they didn't have enough chapters to really make the flow complete. As you can imagine, there were gaps, but I could see some of the gaps immediately. So I set about writing those chapters during that year and the year afterwards that came. But during this last couple of years hiatus that we all had, I realized that, well, this is a good time to put some work into that. So I contacted a woman I know. Her name is Noah Granot. She lives in Israel. She's one of my students over there. Very gifted individual and very, very sensitive. And she'd written a piece, and the piece was about sensitivity and about her realizing that her sensitivity was precious. Her sensitivity was a gift, and her sensitivity was to be protected and guarded. And in that article, she referenced me because I'd helped her with that process during a workshop. And I really liked the way she'd written. So I said to her, look, would you be into helping me frame some of my stuff and refine it a little bit? And she said, sure, that'd be interesting. I'm the kind of person who wants things done yesterday. So I was on her case immediately. As soon as the floodgates open, I'm like, boom, I'm in. So she was, wait, Chris, I cannot give you this for free. This is my job. This is what I do. So that was like, oh, wow, I actually found the exact right person here. But it's her job. She needs money for this. Do I have money? Oh, shit. It's the middle of the lockdowns and all this stuff. I've got less customers than ever. I've got less money than ever. What do I do? If you buy the book or read any sections of it, you'll see that there's a section right at the beginning of the book in the introductory section, and it's called Commitment and the Phases of Development. Commitment and the Phases of Development. Now, I couldn't very well not commit once life had showed me the way forward, right? But commitment involved money, and money was in short supply. But I did it anyway. And the truth is that those 2 years were some of the best financially for me ever, because people wanted to have online courses suddenly. And I could apparently teach online courses. So you see what happened. By committing to paying her to do this work with me and for me, I actually increased the whole project's value and brought in more energy to the project. So that's a lesson again for me, but for anybody else who wants to listen and take note. When you commit, really commit, stuff happens. So I tell you the whole story of that in the book, and that's a really entertaining chapter, I hope. It's painful experiences that I had that helped me grow into this energy of commitment. And usually money is something to do with it, okay? So that's just a little thing there. Mara, did you have a comment? You've written something in the chat, I see.
Yes, but before that, it's Margareta's comment. Expect nothing, expect everything. She likes.
Okay, cool. Very good, yeah. And your comment was?
Transformation beyond time and space. And I was ready to write the commitment and the phases of development.
All right, there you go. Yeah, well, that chapter is all about some personal stories from my life. And I think it's always interesting to remember that the stuff that we recall for a long time is not facts, it's not figures, it's not dates, it's stories. I can still remember all the stories my teacher told me, and I tell them regularly to my patients and to my students, and of course, they remember them. That's the way it works. So stories is this inevitable thing, and most old stories are told in a poetic way. So once again, the poetry of touch, right? Not just touch, but the poetry of touch. And not just writing about things, but writing about them using this inherent poetry that Chinese medicine, Oriental medicine, has always used to express itself, to bring itself into our consciousness. And of course, some of it's paradoxical. Some of it's nonsensical. It's like the Zen koans. That doesn't make any sense at all. That's the point. You're supposed to open your rational thinking, pull your logic apart and enter you into a space that makes no sense whatsoever. And within that space, you'll find a new sense. It pulls you apart to create you again. Where were we going before I made that little break? We were going somewhere specific, weren't we? I can't remember where it was now. Well, I'll tell you what we could do. We could do some practice. We could do some practice around the Ling. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to read you something about the Ling from the Ling chapter. Stay with me for just a moment, and I'm going to find that for you, and we'll find a nice section of the Ling chapter, because there's a few nice sections in there, but I have to find it for you. It's right at the end of the book, so bear with me as we go down. Oh, here we go. Here we go. We're in it. We're in the Ling chapter. Wonderful. So, what I'm going to do is read you this section of this chapter that has to do with the experiences that most mark the Ling points as being very special. So I call this, some people use the word case studies. I don't like that. I call them people stories, because these are stories. I've changed all the names, of course, so this has nothing to do with the names are completely different. Greta is a delicate, small-framed woman of medium height with mid-length grey hair and a penchant for fine, natural fibres. She clothes herself in very high-quality Icelandic and Norwegian woolen garments of natural hues. In practice, this means every conceivable nuance of grey between off-white and charcoal. She is in possession of a fine but modest beauty, which, rearing many children and living with long-term encapsulated trauma, has strained considerably. We had been working through some very old trauma and some more recent issues, especially digestive ones. One day, I decided to move away from the trauma and pathology and work instead on the spiritual shine that was so often conspicuously absent from her visual and behavioral presentation. I informed her that I was using some points that operated on a fine spiritual level, since she had displayed a keen interest for the field and even attended a short course I had given on Oriental Medicine. When she returned 2 weeks later, I asked her what effect she had noticed from our use of the Ling points. She shrugged and said that she had not noticed anything special. Slightly disappointed, I put that down to experience and carried on with the session at hand. Afterwards, as she was preparing to leave, I happened to see her putting on her coat. I performed a double take as I took in the garment she was donning, a gleaming white reindeer skin coat with a shine that was all new. I asked her about it, and she told me it was a coat she had ordered some time ago from a select tailor in the small, expensive streets of Old Stockholm. This handmade coat was so beautiful and finely crafted as to literally stop your breath. It certainly stopped mine. Every detail was of the highest class and quality, and of course, it was made to measure. I asked her how come I'd never seen her wearing it before, and her response told me all I needed to know about the effect of the Ling treatment. Well, up to now, I'd never really thought I was worthy of wearing it. Gregor is a large man of retirement age, well-built, artistic, but what we might call the silent type. We talked about some of the difficult periods of his earlier life, and I received the impression that he was at a stage where he wanted to resolve some of the outstanding issues and re-assimilate what might be regained from them. He made it abundantly clear that he was not interested in any physical issues or symptoms. I found myself using the 5 Ling points and afterwards awaited, somewhat nervously, his opinion on their effect. To my astonishment, he recounted that he had found himself sitting at the bottom of the sea, observing images of his younger self from certain eras of trauma and difficulty. He smiled and looked contented with the result. I used these exact same points on 2 further occasions, and the effects were no less miraculous. On the first occasion, he reported flying around in his childhood hometown. He was able to hover and stop at will to inspect certain things more closely, and laughingly described mundane situations in which women were talking inside a shop he used to frequent. The women were not aware of his presence, but he could clearly hear every word they were saying. Time had stood still, in the sense that these people and things were exactly as he remembered them from his childhood. On the second occasion, it became apparent that part one was merely a prelude, a preparation of sorts for the real deal. He found himself this time in the workshop his grandfather used to run in the same hometown. This had been his favorite place to hang out as a child, since home was a lot less fun for various reasons: mental ill health, relationship issues, etc. He went on to explain that the shop was his haven and that he felt very close to and comfortable with his grandfather. Unfortunately, his grandfather died. Gregor was held back from the funeral by his parents, who deemed it unfitting for a child to attend, and who thus unwittingly denied their son a precious occasion for emotional closure. This seemed to have left a kind of open wound, which Gregor readily acknowledged. He described the last photograph taken of them together, grandson on grandfather's knee, both holding soda bottles and smilingly raising a toast for the camera. He even sent me a copy of the photo, and it was abundantly clear that this had been a very close, warm, and trusting relationship. Sadly, it was also one that lacked a satisfying conclusion. That is, until Ling intervened. Natasha is a middle-aged woman with frankly admitted psychic powers and a caring nature. Also a healer, she came in for treatments quite regularly, since her belief was that the healer also needed healing. Treatments were often focused on the physical plane due to chronic pain experienced in traumatized knees and spreading throughout her body, at times almost uncontrollably. However, since her spiritual nature was so present and vivid, results were invariably experienced on various etheric planes. I used the 5 Ling points on one occasion, and she reported afterwards that her maternal great-grandparents had paid her a visit during the treatment. She had never met these people in real life, but since they explained so clearly who they were and had access to detailed and privileged information regarding the generations in between, she was confident they were who they claimed to be. The reason for their visit was to deliver greetings and reports of well-being from Natasha's maternal grandmother. All was well, was the apparent gist of their message. The backstory was that her grandmother had always been bitter, unloving, and uncommunicative. That is, until one day when 3 generations of women had found themselves in the mother's kitchen, baking for a family gathering. For no apparent reason, the grandmother had opened her hardened shell and interacted in a warm, loving, and verbal fashion. This had gone some way to resolving the tensions felt by both mother and granddaughter. The great-grandparents were, it seems, also here to deliver some background information. It appears that they were rich and well-connected people, and their daughter had been born into an upper-class family of some wealth and privilege. Unfortunately, they had both died suddenly while the daughter was still young. Orphanhood aside, this had the further unfortunate effect of propelling her out of her privilege and into extreme hardship and a life of service and manual labor for which she was ill prepared. The bitterness she was overcome by did not begin to resolve itself until that day in her own daughter's kitchen, and although this had certainly eased tensions to some degree, it had not cleared up the mystery behind the years of insular bitterness. Fortunately, Ling is able to provide such explanations. There's a note there. See Ancestral Energy, that's the next chapter, for a more thorough exploration of generational transformation. These tales of Ling and the transformative power it seems to possess are fantastic enough, but the stories that follow are perhaps even more expansive and intriguing. Ivan is a young man of exceptional brightness and talent. Many-sided intelligence, lively curiosity, and a quickness of wit are his primary characteristics. He asked for the Ling treatment and also requested an extended version of it, i.e., to be left to experience it for well over an hour. The treatment experience ranged through many different phases, and hardly any of them seemed particularly pleasant. Still, each time I inquired, he was insistent that the treatment continue. One part among many stuck in my imagination, since the description was so vivid. It involved a dark forest in central medieval Europe and the dredging up of dark, heavy energies. His experiences might seem better suited to one of the chapters discussing Shiatsu and Jaki. There's another note here, see Shiatsu in the Garden and Travelogue. But since the Ling points brought them out, they are recorded here. Samuel is a slim but solid, faithful kind of person. He is trustworthy, highly talented, and extremely dedicated, though hardly exotic in any way. He is the kind of thoroughly likable person whom one would like to have by one's side in any kind of crisis, and his experience was different from Ivan's in just about every conceivable way. Initially, he experienced being outside of his body, pleasantly gazing down and around the room. He was enjoying this state of mind and body so much that he was disappointed when it shifted. This disappointment was rapidly forgotten. He gradually shifted into a state of being which he did not recognize and barely had words to describe. Slowly, he became aware that he was gazing at a cloud of gold and silver particles. Within the cloud, there was a shape, an absence that delineated some kind of presence. This being was entirely benevolent, and Samuel was completely relaxed in its presence. Once recognized, the being indicated that Samuel should redirect his attention, and a journey immediately commenced. He described it as traveling through worlds, through dimensions, none of which were even remotely familiar. The travel was conducted at different speeds and took in many different kinds of shape, quality, and appearance. Some were of a more visual character, involving aspects of light, while others seemed to lack any clear visual identity and manifested rather in the form of movement or energy. There are other experiences of Ling I could relate, but I've rendered here the ones that I feel I can communicate with the greatest degree of clarity. One can see from the range of experiences described that they all took place on some kind of soul level. They involve aspects of personality, relationships going back several generations in time, and even personal soul experiences ranging not only through time, but also space. A living universal energy field. To say that Ling is unfathomable would be perhaps the most honest definition we could provide. If Ling is mysterious, then it seems to want to stay that way. Approximately 1 year after I'd begun to initiate my relationship with the Ling points, I wrote these lines. Perhaps Ling means oneness, the feeling that all of nature is interdependent and interconnected, a living universal energy field that sustains life while guiding the evolution of consciousness throughout the universe. If Ling is something like that, something as unfathomable as those lines indicate, then isn't it an equally miraculous thing that we can assist another human being in their evolution by interacting with acupoints lying on the very surface of the physical body? And you can see here I've credited Alain Touche with the calligraphy, and that's the calligraphy on the front cover of the book. So Alain, thank you very much for that calligraphy. And I will stop this share right now, come back to you visually. And here's my image again. Any questions about any of that or comments? Let's deal with those now. No, apparently nothing on the chat. So the Ling, was there something?
I have a question.
Please.
Would you show us the Ling point?
Yeah, I'll do that.
To all of us.
I'll do that right now in the form of a set of exercises. So here's the magic of Ling. About a year and a half ago, no less, a year and 3 months ago, I was doing a treatment in this room, this very room here. I was treating somebody, and I was ending the treatment. It was towards the end, and I was treating the Ling points. I was close to the end of it all, and she was gone, completely gone. And I had one hand, my left hand, on one of the Ling points, Ling 4. Heart 4, I'm sorry. It's called Ling Dao, the way of Ling. That's big, folks. It's huge. My left hand was resting on the point very softly, very gently. And I realized that my right arm wanted to move. And I thought, Not a good idea right now to do Katsugen Undo in the middle of a treatment, right? That's not such a great idea. She's resting, she's deep into the treatment. And I asked my body, is it okay if we come back to this later? Because now is not a good time. Sure, no problem. We'll wait. Great. Finished the treatment, did the payment, booked the next treatment, came back in the room, closed the door very firmly, just because I didn't know what was going to come out of this, right? I had no idea what was going to happen. Sat down on my mat and said, okay, what is it you want to do? And what my body wanted to do was this. And it wanted to keep doing it for quite a while. And I thought, oh, you're pointing to one of the Ling points. Up here is gallbladder 18, and it's called Cheng Ling, supporting the Ling. Oh, okay, yeah, you want to connect with the Ling points. That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Before I knew what was going on, it was pointing to the back of my body and a point in my spine. Aha, governor vessel 10, Ling Tai, the Ling platform or the Ling plateau. Ha. And then it was pointing to the front of my body, doing another movement like gigantic wings landing on the chest. On the chest is kidney 24, Ling Shu, the Ling ceremonial mound. And then we moved in from movement into static postures. And the two remaining points on the heart meridian showed themselves as static postures. We'll go through those in just a few short moments. So Qing Ling, which we mentioned before, the blue-green Ling, and Ling Dao, the way of Ling. And then a final movement wanted to come like this. Palms up to heaven. And I realized that what I was doing there was imitating the Chinese character. And I'll tell you all about the way the Chinese character is built up so you can see the structure of it, the way it's put together, and the meaning inside it. You'll understand a lot of what we started our conversation with this evening. So that came like suddenly from nowhere. I mean, it's not the first time I've had Qigong forms come through me, but it was very dramatic the way it came and very beautiful. 2 days later, literally 2 days later, I was with Marina and we were looking for something in a secondhand shop in town. And this golden figurine, this little golden figurine jumped out at me. And she was in this posture. I'll show it to you in a minute. I'll go and get her and show her to you. So I call her the Ling figurine, the Ling goddess. And in the same shop was this shirt with the color of the blue-green Ling for 50 crowns. That's like €5. Come on, that's stealing almost. I felt dishonest almost. Having these gifts from Ling, like, whoa, what's going on? So now I've been teaching this Ling to various people around the world, and people seem to like it very much, and I love it. So why don't we just do it? You can sit or you can stand. It's completely up to you. If you sit, you can sit on a stool, you can sit on a chair, you can sit on 10 cushions, or you can sit however you like. That's not a problem. I sit on 1 cushion. That's all I need, but you might need 2, you might need 0. That's fine. So let's sit ourselves down on the cushion. I'll bring the Ling goddess in so she can join us, and I'll bring you down onto my mat here. Give me 2 seconds to rearrange my room slightly. There's the futon. There's my cushion, and here is the Ling goddess. Amazing, huh?
Gold.
Yeah, it looks like it's gold. I'm sure it isn't, but yeah, she's golden, all right. And she's got this beautiful whole body dress on that's just wonderful. So there she is. She's got a bun. Her hair's in a little bun at the back there. So let's have her sitting there in front of us, if that's possible. There she is. Hopefully she can stay there. Now I'm sitting on 1 cushion, and all of you Zen people know that they have the zabuton, and the zabuton is there to lift the pelvis and tilt the pelvis forward, bring the knees close to the ground, open up the spine, and beautiful things happen. I'm going to have to tilt my camera a little bit. I can see slightly upwards. I was a bit too daring with that. Let's see if that's enough. That should do it. Very nice. Now, sit yourself comfortably. That means putting your sitting bones right down into the earth. And then it means allowing your neck to lengthen at the back, up into the occiput, and up to the crown. So there's a huge lift, an opening and a lengthening going on there in the spine. And there's a sinking going down in the lower body. A very nice, comfortable, stable heaviness in the lower body and a lightness springing out of that. That's our position. That's where we start from. And the next thing we want to do is find a comfortable place for our arms to be. Now, for you, that might be something like this. It might be something like this. It might be, I don't know what it could be, but for me, it's just this. My hands just rest on my legs. Some people like to be all the way out here. They like to be here. It doesn't matter. It's completely not important. What's important is it should cost you nothing. No energy. It's simply for resting and feeling and sensing. So it's a completely neutral position. It can change each time. It doesn't have to be the same one each time. There's no need to limit yourself. So each time we finish an exercise, we'll come back into our resting position. And it can be different each time, or it can be the same each time. For me, it tends to look like this, but I don't know what it's going to look like for you. Okay, I have no way of predicting that. So let it happen as it happens. Just think economy, no energy going out, just circulation and awareness and the ability to reflect and sense and perceive. We move into our first movement. So the first exercise is a movement, and it's the one I showed you in the beginning there, the one that started this whole thing off. The arms go out to the side and they come up, and you can touch your head if you want to, but I tend not to. My fingers float just above my head and they come down again. And my elbows go behind me a little bit. So the movement is a little bit of a schwung movement there and very soft at the top. It's a very economical movement, doesn't involve very much energy expenditure. Perhaps even the opposite. Perhaps we're actually creating energy with this kind of movement. Have you thought about that? Probably you have. That's what Qigong is, right? The speed is not important. I'm just showing you one speed. You can do it faster or slower, however you like. Breathing, just natural. Don't even bother thinking about the breathing. Allow the breathing to do its work completely independently, authentically, and spontaneously. What you'll find if you do that is that the breathing begins to control the movements. And that's exactly what we're looking for. We can't go looking for it. It has to come and find us. That's the paradox of natural breathing. Like I say, if you're going slower than me, that's absolutely fine. If you're going faster than me, good for you. I'm just using this kind of neutral pace here. Could be too fast, too slow for you. Don't worry about it. Do your own thing. How many repetitions you're thinking? Well, there's no answer to that question. But I'm finishing right now. That was just about enough for me today. Sometimes I do more, sometimes less. What happens now? We rest. We rest and digest. We rest and reflect. We rest and perceive. Nothing happens and everything happens, of course. Remember? Expect nothing, expect everything. No good coming into Ling with amazing things are going to happen. Well, maybe nothing. But nothing, within nothing is what? The second movement, that was gallbladder 18 we were using there. Ling, gallbladder 18. First point. Second point is in the spine. It's governor vessel 10. Now, to find that point, what you want to do is have your arms like this. So your arm is at 90 degrees out from the body. What that does is it aligns the tip of your shoulder blade, if you feel behind you, with the 7th cervical thoracic vertebra. And just above that vertebra is governor vessel 10, Ling Tai. Ling Tai, in the books, it says Ling Tower or Ling Platform. But students of mine have said, I think it means Ling Plateau. Let's see what it means for you. So the movement looks like this. Your arms move forwards as if you're offering gifts, and then they turn outwards and spiral around, and your thumbs eventually come into your spine somewhere close to that point. Don't worry about accuracy. And then unwind. And then wind it up again. Big spirals meeting the spine. And then relax. So we're kind of winding it up, big spiral going in. And then we're unwinding, big spiral coming out. That's the movement. No more, but certainly no less. And you'll notice that once I've gotten into my position with my thumbs close to the spine or touching the spine, in my case, I relax the elbows down to give me that moment of All of this is to ensure that we don't use excess energy to do these simple movements. We only use the very energy that we need to accomplish the movement, no more. That way we remain economical, and every ounce of energy which we liberate within our systems becomes useful, creates a landslide of more energy being released throughout the system. Again, how many repetitions? As many as you like. If you just want to do 2 or 3, that's absolutely fine. If you want to do 20, 30, because it feels so great for your shoulders or your chest or whatever, your spine, be my guest. Now, we relax. Top, back, front. That's the order of the first 3 movements, and they are movements. This one goes opposite direction, of course. It goes back to come forwards, and our fingers touch the chest, just outside the chest, but there's the breastbone in the middle. Just outside, you've got space for 3 fingers to enter the 3 spaces around the nipple area. And relax. And again, open those gigantic wings and land softly on the chest, around about the chest area, around about the level of CV17, in fact, Ren 17, Shanzhong. But this is the 3rd Ling point we're interested in here. Kidney 24 is called Ling Shu. And Ling Shu, well, people translate Shu differently. Some people translate it as burial mound, which is not my favorite translation, but it is a useful one, it turns out. My favorite translation is ceremonial mound, because the definition of Ling, when we look in the classic texts, has something to do with connecting ourselves, aligning ourselves so efficiently with the will of the world that things happen without effort. And there's a certain aspect of ceremonial behavior in that, a certain placement of energy and awareness that allows that to happen. So I call it the ceremonial mound in that sense, in a positive sense. Burial ground sounds a little bit negative to me. And yes, you can unlock all sorts of things that are buried psychically in the body through this point. You can. You probably will. You probably have. But also, let's look at the plus side. Ceremonial mound, where we make our tribute to Ling, connect ourselves with the will of the universe, not just our individual soul, but our universal soul that we're also part of. And relax. We have 2 more points to go, and they are both on the heart meridian. So we've gone from head to trunk, back and front, and now we go out to the arm. And the heart meridian has 2 Ling points. One of them, we mentioned it earlier on, Qing Ling. It's 4 fingers from this piece of elbow bone there. You can feel it, that bony piece at the tip. 4 fingers from there, and the softest part of your arm, down near the tendon. That's Qing Ling, heart 2. How do we activate it? We simply place the small intestine meridian on the knee. And we shape our arms in a gigantic circle. Our fingers are straight but relaxed. Our palms are open but relaxed. We imagine energy circulating through this gigantic circle which we create with our arms and our chest. We imagine energy easily able to flow through every aspect of the chest, the back, and the front, but even more importantly, right through the center. Heart meridian, heart center. Do we need to do anything in this position? No. How long should we stay in this position? As long as you like. If it's uncomfortable for you, come out. Go back another time and see if it's more comfortable the next time. If it's very comfortable, stay in it for as long as you like. If you fall asleep in the position, fantastic. If you have visions, if you see things, if you feel things, it's all good. But don't get attached. Just allow those things to be. And relax. Relax back into whatever is your neutral position, the best, most effective neutral position for you right now. That was part 2, Qing Ling. Now we go to part 4, Ling Dao, the way of Ling. And now we turn our palms outwards and downwards slightly. You can see that that creates another gigantic circle. And the same thing applies. Energy rolls and flows and pulses around that circle, through the arms, more importantly, perhaps, through the chest, through the front and the back and the center of the chest. We're opening the point, which is just 1.5 sun from the wrist. So heart 7, you all know about heart 7 there in the wrist crease. And then just 1.5 sun further up is heart 4, Ling Dao. The way of Ling. You'll notice me yawning. That's my way, my body's way of releasing energy. It could be my energy, could be somebody else's energy, could be something else's energy. I notice it a lot during treatments, a lot during Qigong. And I notice it sometimes during regular conversation as well, by the way. You don't have to interpret yawning as meaning tiredness. It can mean tiredness, but it can mean a whole bunch of other things as well. Relax into our comfortable, neutral, reflective position. Our 6th and final exercise, we simply raise the arms up to have the palms facing heaven above our heads. You can have them very far up if you like, but mine tend to just hover slightly above my head. Palms facing heaven. In this position, I tend to focus on the Chinese character representing the concept, the idea of Ling. It does it very efficiently, as you'll soon see. Chinese characters are usually composite. That means they're made up of other Chinese characters. This one is made up of 3 parts: upper, middle, and lower. And the parts sit inside each other, on top of each other, and below each other. At the top is a character that means precipitation. What does that mean? It means weather, stuff coming down from heaven. rain, snow, thunder, lightning, mist, fog, electricity even. So anything coming from heaven is what the top part of the character represents. The middle part of the character is 3 boxes next to each other. Several different interpretations are possible there. One is gifts. Another is exits or entryways. Interesting. Another meaning is mouths open in awe. Could be all of those things, right? You don't even have to choose. The lower part of the character is the shaman. That's you right now. So the shaman receives gifts from heaven, opens entry and exit ways to and from heaven, causes awe-struck reactions from the people around. The shaman gives and receives gifts to and from heaven, connecting heaven and earth. We rest our arms back in our neutral, reflective position. Nothing special, absolutely nothing special. Take a few moments now and just work your way into a situation where you can become fully cognizant of the effect of those exercises, if there was one, or many. What I'd like to do now is to read you a poem that I wrote recently. And I'll bring the Ling goddess with me when I come back to the screen. No need for you to come back to your screens if you don't want to. That's absolutely fine. You can sit in your Ling state. And I'm going to share my screen with you, if that's okay. And I'm going to read you a poem that I wrote recently called Ascension. Retrieving our true nature, redirecting connection to source, returning to love, joy, abundance, turning away from fear, stress, and strain, reigniting our awareness, renewing our abilities and functions, reawakening our higher powers, leaving the consciousness of reactivity, our DNA connection, vital crystal essence, limitless soul awareness in the body material, reactivating vital glands, recreating microstructure, reopening our connection, integrating ourselves back to the one, returning to the natural world, reclaiming our place in nature, restating creative relationship. Ascension means nothing less than this.
Wow.
Yeah.
Margaret asked half an hour almost ago, would you tell us where those link points are? You have? And she says now, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for this presentation of the link points and the movements, Chris. And because we're already 10 minutes, it's, I mean, in Greece it's 9:38.
Ah, it's time for bed.
Christina is asking, does these points have to do with quantum shiatsu?
You'll have to ask somebody who does quantum shiatsu. That's Pauline Sasaki's system. That's not my system. I only met her once, and I looked at her system.
I have studied with Pauline for a seminar, a large seminar in Italy. No, she doesn't use points at all. It's a different system, Christina.
There's the answer to that question.
Yes. And yes, Christina says thank you. And thank you very much for the poem, for sharing your poem with us. Chris, could you please tell us where can we buy your book from? Yes, I will tell where we can buy it from Athens, but tell us about your book. Yes.
There's the book. Let me just change the angle there so you can all see it clearly. The Poetry of Touch. And this little website here tells you all about the book, where it's available, etc., etc. So that's really all you need. But what I did do, that's the cover of the book, of course. That's the cover of the audio book. And if we go down, we'll see the ebook, Poetry of Touch ebook. That's available on Amazon as a Kindle thing. Apparently it costs $36. That's probably like the same number of euros, more or less. So that's kind of expensive, I guess, but the paperback will be more expensive than that, a little bit more expensive. If we keep going down, we'll find the audiobook. That's available on Barnes & Noble and loads of other places. Amazon has it. I think even iTunes and Apple Music have it now. I'm not sure. It's a bit cheaper. Look, you see, $25.90. You don't get the images. You don't get the layout, but what you do get is me reading my work. So you get to hear my voice reading it to you. And again, there's the website. And that will be the cover of the paperback book, which my publisher did receive today, and he sent it to me in the post, so I should get it tomorrow. But it's just a test example, and I think there's a few mistakes in it, so we need to send it back and get a new version. But maybe next week we'll have the real thing for you. And Panayota, you were telling me that maybe it will be available in Athens at the shop, right?
Yes. Whoever wants the paper book, the bookshop Free Thinking Zone in Athens, Areti, who runs the shop, is willing to take our orders and bring the book for all of us. So if you want to book, you can go to the bookshop Free Thinking Zone, or you can email us, Mara and Panayota, Shiatsu World, and we'll contact Areti. And Areti wants us to prepay the book. So because she will bring the copies that we have, that we will order.
There will be a group order, so we will send an email to everyone, so they know until when, which date they should pass by the bookstore shop to pay in advance. So there will be a group order.
I would like, Margaret is asking, do you have experience with the windows of the sky points?
Yes, I do. I use them frequently. I'm not one of the kind of people who uses them as a group necessarily, but I'm aware of them as a group. I use them individually in different treatments, and they have quite different natures. I have a, what would I call it? I have a pattern, a protocol, which I invented about a year and a half ago, called the Eyes of the Soul. And in that pattern, using the liver and gallbladder meridian and the pericardium and triple heater meridians, the side channels, and their law points, bringing the awareness to the eyes through the window to the sky points of the triple heater and small intestine and bladder at the back of the head. All those 3 points will have the name heaven in them, heaven's pillar, heaven's opening, and heaven's window. And I use those to then move all of that vision into the Shen. So that's a very interesting alchemical treatment, which I've taught to nobody here, unfortunately, but you know, the people who come on my regular class, they know all about that. So yes, I do. And I use them in my own way, of course, as everybody else does. I hope that wasn't too confusing an answer.
Well, I just asked because they also have a spiritual connection. And I thought this is, you know, could be a combination of things, maybe.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you.
Everybody does their own thing, right? That's very, very important to remember. I got hit by a Bruce Lee quote the other day. Take what you need, discard the rest, and do it in your own way. Now, of course, that implies that we know what we're doing, and we don't know what we're doing until we have a feel for what we're doing. And we get the feel through practice, through discipline, through training, etc., etc. So it's not an invitation to just kick things down in the street and run rampage and stuff, although there's a place for that as well. But the idea is to not bow down in reverence to everything all the time, but to also acknowledge your own creative impulse, your own creative strength, your own contact with source. And that's what Margareta just showed us beautifully. Thank you.
Thank you.
So people, I guess we're pretty close to the end of our little gathering, are we?
Yes. I have no words to express my admiration to you, Chris, because you have done such an amazing job. I mean, to write a book, I admire you for that. And it's your second book. And thank you very much for the gift you give to us. It's your knowledge, your wisdom, accumulated wisdom throughout your life. And I feel that you share with us your life with your books.
Thank you. Oh, just one thing I might mention. On March the 9th, I start an online course about the extraordinary meridians. That's through Mind Bodify. So anybody who's interested in that, I'm sure Mara and Paniota might help you with that, but you can just contact me directly through Facebook or Messenger or WhatsApp or whatever, and we can talk about that. That's 8 weeks, starting on March 9th, and it's every Thursday for 8 weeks.
Online.
Online. Whereas in May, I'll be with you in Athens. We can celebrate the 4 C's for 3 days at the Zen Dojo, I think. With Antigone is organizing that course. I'm sure you all know Antigone, so I don't need to introduce her to you. So those are 2 ways that we could continue communicating. And thanks, Paniota. Thanks, Mara, for this wonderful initiative, Shiatsu World. It's very much the kind of thing we need. So thank you for that.
So Mara, it's time.
Yes, thank you, Chris, for taking us to the
Thank you very much, Chris. We
with
wish
you.
you all the best for your good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night, everybody. Ciao.
Good night. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you.